Members, we're going to move on to House File 691. And this bill is going to be laid over for possible inclusion in the Omnibus State Government Finance Bill. And just to kind of walk you through, you do have your House research summary that summarizes it quite well, but what we did in 2011, we established a gain-sharing program that rewards state employees for finding efficiencies within state government. It's a way to recognize the hard work of our state employees as well as incentivizing folks to find different ways to do government better and provide services to consumers better. And so what this does is it requires MMB to report on a regular basis on the status of this program, and that's basically what the bill does. I'm first going to ask to see if there's anybody that wishes to testify to it, and then we'll go to members' questions. Is there anyone that wishes to testify on House File 691? Welcome to the committee. If you can please state your name for the record and who you represent.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Edwin Hudson. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Human Capital Management at MMB.
And Mr. Hudson, can you speak into the microphone, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would offer up a few comments, perhaps a little background, and then maybe make a few comments, and then I'll be available for any questions you may have. But again, let me start with the background. I will just say that gain sharing is similar to other profit sharing initiatives that have been created in the private sector to incentivize employees to increase productivity, increase efficiencies, and save money in their organizations. Gain sharing incentives are designed to reward employees for factors they can control, such as improved productivity and cost reduction. The Society of Human Resources defined gain sharing as an individual incentivized plan used to enhance productivity by sharing with a group a percentage of the gains the organization realizes from the specific group's effort. Gain sharing is typically paid out as a percentage of an employee's annual salary or a one-time lump sum payment. Some state governments have adopted gain-sharing programs, most of which vary in design from a simple employee suggestion program with a $1,000 cash award to a more elaborate expenditure reduction or increase efficiency program, which can pay up to as much as $50,000. The state of Minnesota executive branch agencies have approached gain-sharing through achievement awards. Achievement awards are monetary awards granted to recognize outstanding employee achievement and to be used in situations where financial savings have been realized. In 2012, MMB, in coordination with some of our bargaining units, we developed a policy and issued the policy to create a consistent practice for recognizing outstanding employee performance, so that incentives and awards are noticeably linked to employee achievement and performance. This approach was modeled after components of other state government programs. In fiscal year 2014, the executive branch agency provided over 2,600 awards, and the aggregate total value of those awards were just over $2,700,000. In fiscal year 2016, executive branches provided just under 1,900 awards with an aggregate value of $2 million, just over $2 million. Finding operational efficiencies is a part of our everyday work. Under Governor Dayton, we have been directed to create a culture of continuous improvement. Agencies engage in lean events, Kaizen events, results-based accountability activities, and other things. Additionally, all state employees are obligated to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. House File 691 would clarify the Minnesota Management and Budget must establish a gain-sharing program separate and distinct from existing employee recognition programs and require monthly reporting, implementation, and operations of that program. MMB supports employee recognition programs. MMB also supports the goals of this gain-sharing program, which are to reduce the cost of operating state government and find ways of providing better or more efficient state services. We also believe that employees are uniquely situated to recommend creative ways to achieve these goals. I share these statements with you to indicate MMB's commitment to achieve goals of gain-sharing program. I've reviewed the bill and I've noted that it has no funding to develop, promote, or administer a gain-sharing program. Given this, implementing the program separate from an achievement award will create that cost or various costs associated, and that will be identified in the fiscal note that we're preparing for you. Again, as proposed, House File 691 is an unfunded mandate. MMB maintains the necessity for the bill to carry funding for resources to support this enterprise program. Madam Chair and members of the committee, I pause for questions and any comments you may have. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, in your statement, you said that this bill establishes the gain-sharing program, which it does not, because the program was established in 2011. So are you telling me that the department, MMB, has failed to follow through on the law that was passed in 2011?
Madam Chair, I'm suggesting to you that there are all types of gain-sharing programs, and some of them, as I'd indicated in my testimony, are as simple as an employee suggestion program. And our particular program was modeled after some components of a couple of states, so it is a type of a gain-sharing program.
Mr. Johnson, did you establish the gain-sharing program that was drafted in and passed into law in 2011 and signed by Governor Dayton as the language here in section 16A.90?
Madam Chair, MMB did establish a version of that gain-sharing program. Yes, ma'am.
Did you establish the gain-sharing program as defined in 16A.90?
Madam Chair, we believe we did accomplish that. We believe that our program comports with the law.
Well, Mr. Johnson, you just said that you didn't. You did a different version. You said that you've done an improvement award and a achievement award version.
Madam Chair, we did a version of a gain-sharing program, and ours, we call it an employee achievement program, but that, such as in other states, is a type of a gain-sharing program.
Mr. Johnson, how much have you spent on the achievement awards and continuous achievement improvement awards? Or Mr. Hudson, excuse me.
That's okay. Madam Chair,
apologize.
in fiscal year 14, we spent just under $2,800,000.
And what year was that?
That was fiscal year 14. In fiscal year 16, we spent $2,000,001.
Mr. Hudson, excuse me. I would like to have an itemization of all of those awards that you divvied out, and by agency as well.
Madam Chair, we can provide that for you. Thank you.
Members, also, you will see in this legislation that it asks that they report on the achievement awards and any other performance-based recognition programs for state employees. Questions? I've got Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, some of my questions go back to previous practices and everything else. First of all, I notice there's wide disparities in terms of the total amounts of the awards. For instance, the Department of Human Services received, I hope I'm reading this wrong, $686,500 in bonuses. Is that correct?
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair and Representative, thank you for your question. We can go back and provide you a detailed breakout of the payouts. I don't have that in front of me, and at this point, I'm not in a position to say how or why that might vary.
Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. in past practices, when we're paying out all of this money, and I understand, incentives and things are very important, what type of benchmarks did you use to determine the reduced cost of operation or the more efficient services? What were the benchmarks that you used to determine, for instance, the 10% cost savings that you related to the bonuses?
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair and Representative, there are a lot of benchmarks out there that's available. We used a lot of states and looked at their program as indicated. A component of their program is what we had implemented. So there are several states out there who have these programs. There's Alabama, Illinois, Indiana. There's quite a few states out there that we referenced. In addition to that, we looked at the private sector to see what they're doing with their gain sharing program. This is a program, again, that is akin to their profit sharing program. And we have some research there, and we know some of those benchmarks as well.
Madam Chair?
Representative Uglum.
Commissioner, could you give me a specific example of how you arrived at, for instance, an individual's bonus of whatever it might be, 10% cost savings? Could you give me a specific example of the benchmarking that you used to arrive at an individual person's bonus?
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair and Representative, the Society of Human Resources would suggest that the average benchmarks for a gain-sharing program is anywhere from 4 to 8% of one's annual salary. So that is an example of a benchmark that we considered.
Madam Chair?
Representative Uglum.
Okay, I'm not too interested in the percentage, but how did you, for instance, determine the bonus? Okay, so we're saving money. We've come up with some new process and everything else. Number one, for instance, is a direct manager involved? And how do you determine on an equity basis with everyone throughout the department, how do you determine the amount of money that you're giving somebody, and how do you audit those savings to prove that they are correct and the 10% or whatever is appropriate?
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair and Representative, again, thank you for your question. We appreciate that. This provision will require us to add a little bit more meat to the bones and build up the program to the extent that we can provide the oversight that we should be providing it. And not only that, so that we can even analyze the payment versus the spending, the savings. At this point, we've not dedicated any resources apart from allowing each agency to make those determinations at this point.
Representative Uglum.
Madam Chair, so what I'm trying to get at, Commissioner, is we're paying out $686,000 in bonuses to Health and Human Services, 610 awards. And how are we internally making those decisions that that amount of money is going to be saved on reduced costs of operations? And how do we audit that? Is it a subjective process where a manager looks at it and says, oh, yes, we're going to save this amount of money, so good, you get 10% of it? How is the process done?
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair, Representative, in 2012, we established a policy and we came up with some guidelines and some criterion for all of the awards. And to the extent that they match the policy and the criterion that we established, and we can provide that for you, we were okay with the award going forward. But again, we left that up to the determination, for the most part, to our agencies. But with the revisions that have been proposed, we're proposing to implement a more robust plan so that we can have some sort of analysis, cost-saving analysis associated with these awards.
Representative Uglum.
Madam Chair, thank you. Commissioner, who says no? Who says no that this does not qualify for a bonus? Who says that?
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair, Representative, I can speak for our agency at MMB. It is our leadership team. We discuss these awards. We discuss the significance, the weight of these awards, and we make a collective decision as if the award is going to go forward. That's how we handle it at the MMB.
Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, how many awards have been denied?
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair, Representative, I don't know how many awards have been denied. I can provide that information to you, but I can tell you in the last quarter at MMB again, we've denied 3 of them. So I can tell you that.
Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So 3 out of hundreds. Okay, thank you.
Representative Uglum brought up a good point. In addition to how the awards that you've given out, I want to actually see the documentation of the savings that were achieved in each individual agency as well. And if I don't have that in my bill currently, I think that we should probably make that as a provision as well when we do this later on as well. So I've got Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's uncanny how you steal my questions
Oh, I'm
from time to
sorry.
time, but it's okay. I have others. Commissioner, question for you. Did I hear you correctly? You said that you've done both a Six Sigma and a Kaizen. Are those both programs you have up and running, or you've just sort of modeled some of the work that you're doing after those, or is there a formalized plan that you're using for these lean manufacturing or Kaizen or Six Sigma?
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair and Representative Nash, thank you. We have had these Kaizen, different types of quality events. Again, the governor has directed us to maintain our efforts in continuous quality improvement. There's a whole department at admin that oversees this work. I'm pleased that they're here in the audience today. And each agency has a component of that, whereas we're ensuring that inside of our process, we have some sort of continuous improvement component.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so I've been a part of those, and man, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It really is. And when I was running a division of sales for a company, had a large P&L, and I had to allocate money for the administration of those programs and for the collateral that we had to buy and for the training sessions that we had to do and all those things. Can you tell us what the cost of administering these Six Sigma programs are? And my question is this specifically: Did you back that out of the savings that were realized? Are you amortizing that over the various departments as a saving, or who's bearing the cost of the training for Six Sigma?
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair and Representative Nash, I don't have that information in front of me, but I can do my best to get that to you.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next question, and I wanted to make sure I heard you right. You said when you were giving your testimony that finding operational efficiencies are a part of your everyday work, and I applaud that. And I guess my question is, because when I worked on these, we didn't incentivize our employees to do so. And I'm questioning is, do you feel that the employees would find these efficiencies irrespective of cash reward?
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair and Representative Nash, there's a whole body of research out there that would challenge the effectiveness of these programs, many of whom, such as there's a gentleman by the name of Pink, and there's a Harvard Business Review, and then there's a psychological organization out there that have challenged the bonus incentive programs, and some have concluded that any gains in these programs are short-lived. Some have concluded that. But again, the research is mixed. And the research also would suggest that there may not be any difference in terms of the amount of the award. So whether it's $50 or $5,000, there's some research out there that would suggest if a larger amount would encourage one to work harder or to come up with a more ideal. So the research is mixed.
Representative Nash.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. And I guess since you're specifically at MMB, right? If I could, because everybody has one, if you could tell us maybe one of the more exciting innovations or cost efficiencies that you've found, well, let's just say in the last couple of years. I like to hear them because you do find some good stuff from time to time, and I think that the committee would like to hear some of those efficiencies and if you've got a cost savings associated with them.
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair and Representative Nash, there's a bunch of them that come just flooding my mind right now. I'll mention one, perhaps two, if you'd like, but both of them are related to sourcing for our state employees to ensure that we have top talent. We had an old recruiting system called Resumex. We transitioned to a system that is now referred to as Recruiting Solutions. And this was a project that I'm so proud of all of the contributions that we had from all the various different types of the agencies, plans, and commissions who gave us feedback at MMB in terms of how effective to use this tool, how to set it up, some of the nuances, some of the defaults. So that was a project that was very valuable and helped us in the implementation of that, and it's an effective tool today. Now, we have some system challenges that we need to fix. Some of our systems and software, it's still antiquated, very much outdated, but with what we have, you should be proud of the participation that we had from our agencies who came forward and made this a very good product.
Representative Nash.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And my last question is, so we're going to go back to when I was doing the lean manufacturing stuff. We found a lot of savings. And the great part was that we found a lot of savings and put cash back to the bottom line. The other part was that it was expected of my department to not have that in a budget request moving forward because we found some savings. And I guess my question is, can you show us some examples of a lower budget request by your department and all departments as a result of these savings? Because I'm really curious if that's actually been done, and I'm sure that you probably don't have that with you, but if you would, or maybe you do. But if you don't, we'd really like to get that back to the entire committee.
Mr. Hudson, can you quantify the amount that was saved?
Madam Chair and Representative Nash, I don't have that information here in front of me. There are examples we would be happy to provide you with.
And Madam Chair.
Representative Nash?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And please, you know, the specific part of the question that I really want answered is, did that lead to a smaller budget request for the next biennium?
Mr.
Because
Hudson?
if you save the money, then you shouldn't need that much moving forward.
Mr. Hudson?
Madam Chair and Representative, even with the example that I provided there with Recruiting Solutions, that particular expense is one that you won't see anymore because we were able to come together to put out a product that was sufficient within the systems capabilities that we had. Now, barring the systems concerns, you will not see any other requests for expenses regarding the Recruiting Solutions. But I don't have any others available with that detailed information with me today, but we'll be happy to provide that for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as a general principle, I do agree with the notion that once the legislature puts in place a program such as this, that the expectation that it be followed makes perfect sense to me, so I don't have a problem by and large with this kind of legislation. A concern or question I would have is fiscal costs to it. Is that with the reports that need to be provided? Is that the concern with fiscal costs, Commissioner?
Mr. Hudson?
Madam Chair and Representative Johnson, there are a lot of costs that's going to be associated with doing something apart from the Employee Achievement Program. There's going to be implementation cost. There's going to be operational cost. There's going to be cost that was previously referenced by the representative, where we're going to have to do some sort of analysis to make sure that we have a good payout expense ratio. So there's going to be all sorts of operational costs associated with this. Plus, we're going to have to market this with our existing employees and have some sort of educational program even for new employees. So there is and will be some cost associated with the program other than the Employee Achievement Program.
Representative Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It doesn't sound prohibitive, but I understand there would be some cost there. One last question on the monthly report. That seems more often perhaps than necessary. I'm not sure how strongly the chair feels about that, but is monthly report, does that seem kind of frequent? Or is that reasonable?
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair and Representative Johnson, again, thank you for your question. Monthly reporting on this type of a program, we believe we probably could provide you this information, the same information on a quarterly basis at least. But a monthly, if that's what's required of us to do that, we'll do what we can do to get you your information on a monthly basis. Thank you.
Representative Johnson. Representative Vogel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And question might be first to staff. I'm looking at, on the existing statute, line 1.12, and it says that, basically, that the cost savings is determined by the commissioner to have resulted in documented cost savings. So as that statute is written, would that imply, it implies to me that before the bonus could be paid out, that it would have to be documented somehow in, that it actually had in the past saved money?
Mr. Gehring.
Madam Chair, Representative Vogel, yes, so I'm not quite sure about the tense here. I think the intent is that the commissioner needs to have some sort of demonstrated or some sort of documented actual cost savings to the state before they can make the award. I can see where the grammar is a little bit awkward there about when the savings needs to occur before the award can be made. But I didn't staff this bill when it was first passed, so I'm not sure of the intent.
Representative Vogel.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. So I could probably make the inference then that whether it had to be past tense and have been documented, or documented at the time that it was done before it could be paid out, that it probably would have had to been one of those two things to be consistent with the statute?
Mr. Gehring.
Madam Chair, Representative Vogel, yeah, I agree with that.
Representative Vogel.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Hudson, then, as you prepare these reports, I'm coming up with between $6.8 and $7 million been paid out over 14, 15, and 16. It would also be helpful then to see there should be about nearly $70 million of cost savings. If you could show all of those with that report, that would be helpful, because then it would be consistent with what I'm reading here. So that's a question, if you could provide that.
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair and Representative Vogel, thank you again for your question. I don't have that information with me. I'll be happy to go back and try to get that to you.
And Representative Vogel.
Okay, well, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, like I said, it kind of becomes the balance two thing, I think, for the report to be properly presented with, if we paid out, say, close to $7 million, that we document at least $70 million, which $7 million would be 10% of then, so that when the report's prepared, it doesn't have to be maybe redone. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think Representative Johnson just left, but just as a kind of a experiential comment, when we were doing our Six Sigma and Kaizen things, it was regular practice to meet monthly and report back to the collective as to what our findings were. Usually didn't take that very long. It was done over a lunchtime. We would have a working lunch where we would do a Six Sigma report. So from my perspective, having done it in the private sector, it doesn't seem all that difficult to do. Thank you.
Representative O'Driscoll. Oops, he's gone. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. More of a comment. As I'm looking at the original legislation that I understand was authored by Keith Downey in 2011 and 12, I'm looking at this and thinking, this is really casual language. There's really not a lot of structure there that would have given the agency much guidance. And as I'm hearing the discussion, it seems like I'm glad you're doing this, because it's going to give them the structure, but I guess I feel like there's some things that we have some questions about. So I'm assuming that as you move forward, there'll be some more conversations about what actually will be helpful and what can be accomplished and what kind of reporting back we want. We've got a long list of things here, so I thank you for doing that, because the original legislation sounds very casual.
Well, Representative Ward, I think when you're asking for a project that is determined by the commissioner to have resulted in documented cost savings to the state, and then it prescribes to what amount and how much can be given, to me, that sounds pretty prescriptive. And what I'm hearing from the agency is that they haven't done that at all. Instead, they decided to create their own version, which, Mr. Hudson, I'd like to know, by what authority do you have to give any achievement awards and continuous improvement awards? What legislative point to the statute that allows you to do that?
Madam Chair, we believe that the statute that's in front of us today gives us that authority. Plus, we believe there's language in 43A that also gives us that authority. We'll be happy to go back, and with this further guidance that you're providing here or proposing the language, we'll be happy to go back and put together a gain-sharing program, perhaps that better meets your expectation. But I am appreciative of the language, at least the proposed language here, that will give us the opportunity to go back and implement something much more than what we have.
Well, and prior to that, Mr. Hudson, we've had several questions about what actual savings have been achieved. So I'm looking forward to that in particular, and each agency's way of handing this out. At one point in some of the information that you've provided, you said achievement awards may be granted for team recognition, project recognition, and individual recognition, and that has nothing to do with cost savings, which is what the statute says. But with that, I've got Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, looking at this programming and having seen it at different organizations, similar things in the private sector, Malcolm Baldridge, continuous improvement, learned my Six Sigma at Motorola, so I'm familiar with the things that are driving it, and I'm also familiar with the fact that some of these activities are part of the job descriptions of personnel, and so we had people that were exempted from receiving this in the private if part of their job description was to do these activities and save money. Is there any restriction such as that with the current program that's implemented?
Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair and Representative Ward, thank you for your question. I too have, in the private industry, had some experience in this, and even in my services in the military. In the military, it started with what we call TQM, Total Quality Management, and in the private sector, it transitioned with Malcolm Baldridge's work, and in fact, I had the privilege of winning a team that I supported winning the Malcolm Baldridge Award. So I'm very familiar with what you're asking there. Typically, this does exclude certain individuals from participating, such as senior leadership, supervisors and managers. Our program, currently as it's written, it's pretty open, and it's at the discretion of the commissioner at each individual agency in terms of who participates. We have some ideals if we're required to establish a gain-sharing program that is more robust. We have some ideals in terms of who would and would not be included in the program. We believe that all employees are responsible and are obligated to find out cost savings for taxpayers. So this should be a part of everyone's job description to a great extent. Quality improvement. Everyone should have a vested interest in that.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you've got some information to clarify who is exempted from receiving this, and part of the intent in the same time period of the Savvy was that you would incentivize improvements, and then the general fund would actually receive some money back, and the agency or campus would be able to use some of the funds for activities for their mission that maybe weren't descriptive, in the legislature. So is there any delineation between that assessment where it's part of the mission of a group and they achieve savings, and then money goes back to the state you know, how would you delineate that? Because I understand that there are groups that have had both things. The Department of Administration has had Savvy and the gain sharing.
Deputy Commissioner.
Madam Chair, let's go on. Mr. Chair, we can provide you that information. As we build this up, we are looking at other programs, and we see that many other states have excluded, for an example, exempt employees. I'm not sure that that's the direction we will go in terms of who will be excluded from the program. Certainly, there are some positions that should be excluded from this program. And as we build this up, again, should we be required to do something more than the achievement program, we will have those exclusions for you, and we can provide that information.
Okay, Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I may have missed this when I stepped out, and I have been trying to do a little bit of research on this, but Mr. Hudson, can you just review for me, and perhaps the committee as well, what methods you use to market, to promote internally this program within the different agencies, or how you get the information down, how it rolls back up into MMB, and who might be tracking that, and putting the encouraging words out to participate in the plans?
Deputy Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, Representative Driscoll, we have a marketing team at our Minnesota Management and Budget, and they do a terrific job with the resources that they have. But clearly, we need to create more laterals. We need to get this out in the hands of every one of our employees, and we need to also create a culture. And that's going to require us to train our supervisors and managers where employees will feel empowered to come up with these thoughts, these ideals, and be a little bit more inquisitive about their work in terms of how they might be able to save the state a little bit more money. So we have a lot more marketing to do around this. And then we have the concern with new employees, because we want to welcome them into a culture where one can be empowered to come up with such ideals and expect to receive a reward for that.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Hudson, I appreciate your answer. But if this was enacted into law in 2011, 2012, and we're in 2017, how much longer than the 5 years that we've already had, or 5.5 years, will we need to continue to train supervisors and employees and engage employees and make the newcomers feel welcome to participate in a cost savings, and what would amount to be a bonus to them for their due diligence?
Okay. Was there a question? Okay. Mr. Hudson.
Madam Chair and Representative, we at MMB, we've done with the resources that we have, our communication team has done an excellent job communicating this program. We've created a policy in 2012. Every one of our agencies, they're very much familiar with this policy. They know the criteria of the program. But it requires more than getting that out there, and we're hopeful that this legislation will include some funds that will allow us to do what's adequate so that we can promote this and get back the payback that we typically would get in a program such as this.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe this will be my last question on the topic. Given the zeal that the testifier has on this, I just have one question. And maybe, Madam Chair, we know this on our end. Have we ever received any budget requests in the 5.5 to 6 years that the plan has been put in place because of the shortfall of funds to be able to properly market and to educate and inform the staff, supervisors, employees, and newly hired employees of the benefits of this program?
Mr. Hudson, have you ever made a request, or Ms. Roberts, do you want to comment to that as well?
Madam Chair and members, I'm not aware of any requests having been made.
Mr. Hudson, has the agency ever come forward with a request for funding for this?
Madam Chair and representatives, I'm not aware of a specific request, but there has been requests for resources for communication and so on and so forth. But beyond that, I would have to get that information to you.
Representative O'Driscoll. Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hudson, there's been numerous references to Kaizen and Six Sigma, and maybe for a number of us in the audience, you could explain those programs and how they're functioning at the state.
Mr. Hudson?
Just tell us what they are.
Madam Chair and Representative, thank you for your question. There are different types of quality initiatives, and they take on different looks. For an example, there is one that lends itself more for the manufacturing environment. There's another approach, Kaizen approach, that lends itself better to a process improvement, where you might look at your processes and make better decisions, maybe because you've come up with something, an alternative, that perhaps reduces the number of steps. So it really depends upon what you're trying to achieve in terms of what particular initiative or what type of quality program you might implement.
Madam
Representative
Chair.
Uglum?
Well, Mr. Hudson, I'm familiar with both programs, but could you tell me the difference between Kaizen and Six Sigma, for example?
Mr. Hudson?
Madam Chair and Representative, I can't give you the textbook definition in terms of what's the difference between those two programs or any other program, such as the Total Quality Management Program. But suffice it to say, it is all in the spirit of making continuous improvement, and that's what we're trying to better our processes and reduce cost and take the rework out of it and stop recreating the wheel. So that's really the objective to some of those programs or some of those tactics or techniques, quality techniques, but give you a definition of each one of those. I'm not prepared to do that today.
Representative Uglum?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, you know, my point is, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but my point is, in management circles, everybody gives lip service to these great terms, Kaizen, Six Sigma, total quality management, continuous improvement, and everything else. But the fact is, they're best management practices. If you're a good manager and if you're a good executive, you do this kind of thing every day, and you get paid for it. You get paid for it. So, you know, I find it kind of interesting where not just you, but so many of our departments throw these terms around, but then they can't quantify them. And I'm very disturbed by that. Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Hudson. We look forward to the information that we've requested, and we will share that with the committee as a whole.